Welcome to Conversations with Life. We're in season 3, and we're talking all about archetypes this season. And today we are going to discuss the hero's journey. And I'm super excited about this because everything I know about this I learned from Steve. And it's really great to have Keith here as well, who's also
English
an
teachers
educator.
unite.
Yep, have these two English teachers. So I'm excited to, hear what they have to say and kind of map this out, and see how this relates to our spiritual awakening / consciousness journeys.
Yeah, this is a big one, and it's interesting and nuanced, and one of the things that I see about it is that you've got to take this. You can take this literally, kind of like this is a pattern that happens over and over in story generally, or you can take it personally. There's like the spiritual version of the hero's journey, and I think both are really valid. But I think they kind of get a little bit cross sometimes, and people make assumptions about this.
Yeah, I was going to say, we often assume that the literary hero's journey is what we should be experiencing, and we get trapped looking for the literal mentor or looking for the path or the crossing between our current world and the new world, and getting really frustrated when it doesn't literally show up the way we're expecting it to. And actually, the hero's journey in the span of an average Joe from Utah looks really different and really calm in comparison to, Odysseus. Like, we ain't hurtling axes through friggin' hoops.
I mean, sort of, and culturally and, thematically appropriate, though, right? Like, it might feel like when you really are on this pattern, you feel like Odysseus. It's just, you're in an Odyssey instead of like, you're in an Odyssey rather than on an Odyssey, driving down the road with your family.
Oh, come on.
There you go. Also, who says you're Odysseus? Like the I am the main character of my story is like you might just be like, Roman number 7. Like,
No, seriously though, in the latest Deadpool Wolverine,
loved that movie.
It was really fun. But they were in superhero hell, and they find this old Honda Odyssey. Now you gotta understand that my ex-wife and we drove a series of old beat up Honda Odysseys. We had that model. I'm quite sure. Like, this is like a 20-year
nostalgia for you,
for us. And they get in this Odyssey and they're driving across superhero hell, looking to feel important. And I'm like, it's pretty much my life.
Yeah.
Right there.
I mean, less gore.
But I don't know. That car saw some gore.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Not that much. But yeah, it was pretty gory. But anyway, so this hero's journey is really interesting. And now Joseph Campbell, I'm just going to take it on right from the beginning because a lot of people, I remember listening to the Bill Moyers interview of Joseph Campbell, which is like the #1 program ever to show on PBS. Right?
Okay.
Like, it is the most popular PBS program ever. And there's this beautiful interview between Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell. And they have this and Joseph Campbell was really, really into this theory. And, he made a case. It was really good. But what people don't get is that this seeing is actually pretty dark. The thing that people miss about the hero's journey is that at the end of the book of A Hero with 1,000 Faces, Joseph Campbell is mourning the fact that everybody now has to take the hero's journey, because what the hero's journey is, like, in the energy, mythic, like, ecosystem, is the way in which we mythically catch up to ourselves. Something's not right. The hero has to go out and encounter in himself and in the world what's not right. And then he finds the elixir and brings it back. And mythically, that's the way that societies adapt to changing energies. Mm-hmm. Like our story is changing and we're evolving, and there's new ways to do things and new ways to be and new economic forms and new world forms and new, and the hero has to go out and figure that out, and then he brings back that peace, and then that gets integrated into society. So, like, in that kind of mythic energy ecology, that's that's what the hero was for, and that's why he shows up over and over again, because we've needed to adapt, not just physically, not just socially, but like energetically, mythically, archetypally, we've needed to adapt. So these things are universal, but they're also interesting how they've changed. And what Campbell was saying was that now every human being needs to be the hero.
Well, because for a long time we talked about this last episode.
Yeah.
What was the one before? The one about God.
Yeah.
We talked about this idea of, for a really long time, we sacrificed the individual to the community and we believed society.
Yeah.
And then we stopped doing that and we became the most important thing and nobody else had value. And now we're coming to some kind of middle ground where we're seeing the individual as central and important, and that each individual has value. So even still with the hybrid model, if you want to call it that, there still needs to be multiple heroes' journeys enough that everyone in a vicinity can get the journey. So it may not have to be individualized in the future, but at least it's going to be more than it was when we just accepted that our hero went out and our champion did battle for us, which we don't do anymore. We don't believe in anymore.
Yeah, we all have to fight this journey on our own, and to the level that's valid, and everybody gets to decide that for themselves. The monomyth, whatever, is super interesting, and it's kind of, once you see it, it's a pattern that you see everywhere, and kind of I've had times where it's like dominated my thinking, but what I would say is that this journey is lonely, difficult, challenging, and also that it doesn't have to be that way fully. It doesn't need to be the way that it's drawn out in the myths, and it doesn't need to be the way that it is in the stories all the time. So it's just, to me, it's really fascinating. So this journey that we're going to take, and we're going to talk about the steps and so forth today on the mythic journey, on the hero's journey, and
It's a lot more than we think it is.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say, and we can edit this back, but one thing I wanted to say is that it's actually kind of describing an individualist process. And now we're moving into a place where we're actually moving more collective. So we've been in individualism. We're all having to take on the journey on ourselves, but we're recognizing that that's super painful to be isolated from each other in our myths, in our heroes' journeys. And now we're trying to find almost a way to figure that out in society.
Yeah, one of the things, I think I even have this quip on my website, is you have to do this work by yourself, but you don't have to do it alone. And the distinction there is you're the only one in there. And we can walk side by side on our own individual journeys in this experience, and there are enough common themes that there's a level of shared experience and commonality and space holding that can be done.
Yeah, so let's take this on, because I think just kind of going around, it's funny because this is a linear, non-linear process. Like you say, if somebody living their life is going to look at like a Harry Potter story or Star Wars story, the famous ones, The Hobbit, whatever, the mythic, that this fits to a T. And there's been many movies written on this because of a memo written by a fella who was, cued into this pattern. And he's like, this is a really beautiful, satisfying narrative structure. And so people started to do this, right? And in movies, really deliberately building hero's journey stories. And they are beautiful. It is a wonderful structure. But also, we take it non-linearly, right? Like all these different parts kind of happen at once. Or maybe they happen years apart, or maybe they happen out of order in some way. And so you can't take this in a linear way, but there is a sort of linear and kind of like, you would say there's pieces that fall into place, tumblers, if you will. When somebody's on this journey and when they're taking any effort really is the hero's journey, because it's the archetype of action. It's the archetype of doing. It's the archetype of moving forward and completing a process. And you can see all the things kind of fit in over a period of time. So if I have a particular effort I'm doing, like I'm trying to build a business, or I'm trying to create anything in my life, I'm trying to create a podcast and market it. I'm trying to, anything that I'm really trying to do, you can see all these steps you're going to face all these steps. But not necessarily in some kind of like regular order where you're like, okay, well, I met the goddess. Now where's my atonement with the father? It doesn't necessarily happen that way.
So one of the things that I feel like I want to presence, and we talked about this, several episodes back, but it feels important. That's another distinction between what we're seeing maybe in the cinema or on these big stories versus the everyday life. Hero's journey is, it's pretty rare these days that you actually get to step out of your ordinary mundane reality while you're doing the hero's journey. You don't get the letter to Hogwarts.
Right.
I mean,
we've all been waiting.
I
want this wizard to show up with a fucking ring and just like, now is the time, Steve Barfus.
And we talked about
you're gonna do something really cool finally.
You're a wizard.
You're a wizard, Steve.
Yeah, and we long for that. And I think that longing comes from that more primitive shamanic tribal thing where like there was one or two people in the tribe that were the ones that did this, and now it's like, oh, I have to do this and run a business and feed my kids and buy prom dresses and whatever, wash the dishes, the things that in a different model you got to step out of that in order to have this deep encounter with your soul. And we don't get to do that. Very rarely do we get to do that in today's world. And so I think a part of the value of this discussion is, how do we do that? How can we do that in our everyday lives?
And I mean, realistically, it comes back to the realism, like the literal translation versus the more like spiritual or figurative translation, right? We don't actually leave our residence and our workplace and go on a literal adventure, but our minds do, right? And we leave our literal reality, when our thought processes change, when our beliefs change, we do literally leave behind the things that we thought and believed before. So that spiritual hero's journey does really resemble, even if it's more drawn out or out of order, the hero's journey we see in real life. But that would be a really fucking boring movie. If it's just Harry in a cupboard under the stairs reevaluating his life. That'd be fucking boring. I want a spell or two, right?
Yeah.
So when I look at those movies, and this is in history and literature and all the things, and you can see it in big people who accomplish big things. Think of like world leaders, right? They're out there doing that. You can see it. You can see the actual action of them leaving. But that's, when I apply that to my life, I can't be like, well, I guess I'm just going to fuck off into the woods for I have family, I have a mortgage, right? But my mind can fuck off into the woods for 2 years and think through a thing. So I guess that's how I sort of align that discrepancy, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that there's a longing for the leaving, and we have to encounter that longing and realize that absolutely there are going to be things that we leave behind. Big pieces of our known reality are going to change, and also there are things that we absolutely can't and maybe shouldn't leave behind,
Yeah.
my children being a really specific one for me.
Children there's some things that are so close to soul that your soul isn't going to call you away from this. And it's interesting to think about the hero's journey because, for instance, Keith's journey out to get a prom dress for his daughter today is a hero's journey. There's the call, right? Leaving the known world. I've never bought a prom dress before. This is now I'm working with suddenly this teenage daughter that I have, and I don't know how to deal with this. And now he meets the goddess, and she says, "What do you want?" And you're like, "What do we want? How do we want this?" And you meet the father. Can I do it? Can I actually, have the patience here? And I'm finding the elixir. And then you bring it home, and then there's a prom dress, and everybody's happy again, right? Like, and somewhere in there was a dragon.
Yeah.
Meaning you probably had to pay for an expensive prom dress.
It wasn't too bad.
wasn't
Go down to Altered State. They have some good stuff.
But you could say you could live any action. I could get up and get a glass of water, and it's kind of a hero's journey. It's an archetype of action for me.
Yeah.
But the biggest journey, the real hero's journey, is the soul's journey.
Right.
And it's what's happening underneath your personality. Your personality builds itself, and the personality always builds itself, like we've said, to destroy itself. The whole reason you build a personality is to get away from consciousness so that you can find consciousness. So this is this pattern happening again. So the known world is always the ego construct. And you've built it, and you built it with other people, and we've built it together. We're all building this at the same time at different levels and time periods, and all that is going. But it's generally our individual and collective ego construct, and it's not working. Why? Because we're not getting to the core. We're not honoring the deepest aspects of ourselves, and we know it. And so when we're in the known world and we're in ego land, personality land, and it's comfortable, and we've built something pretty cool. Maybe so I've heard a gentleman was talking about this last night in a speech we heard, where it's like, you get to your midlife and you've built something, you've built a career, and you're like, well, shit, I still feel like I'm worthless.
Yeah.
I still feel like this is
Turns out
working.
accounting sucks ass.
Yeah, because the soul has been calling you all, and some people get lucky and get to hear it pretty young, and some people don't hear it until very late in life, and it's always there, and it shows up as anxiety. And this is the discomfort we have between our soul's movement and our personality process. There's a lot of reasons for anxiety, by the way. There's medical reasons, chemical imbalance is not always the call, but often the call shows up as just discomfort that we don't know what to do with. And Alan Watts says anxiety is energy not knowing what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, we externalize this in the symbol of a hero, Luke Skywalker, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. And he's like, nah, I'm not going to do this, blah, blah, blah. He comes back, his uncle and aunt are fried, and he's on a journey, right? He gets kicked out. And by the way, this happens to people. Sometimes they do get kicked out, They'll get kicked out of their job. They'll all of a sudden lose their job that they thought was the thing that they had worked their whole life for, and then all of a sudden it's not there. Their marriage will end. Their the thing that they worked for all this time turns out to be obsolete because of technology or whatever it is that they've got going on. Life will find a way to call you deeper, and it will often do that with loss. Mm-hmm. So anxiety and loss. Isn't it fun? Isn't it fun that we get to start the story with anxiety and loss? It's not some romantic, thing where you're like in this nice place and all of a sudden there's a hero and there's this opportunity to go on an adventure. Yay, It's never like that. And actually the hero's never like that either. Maybe Harry Potter, maybe some of the others, but not too much. Usually it's like, it's something pretty dramatic that kicks their ass that makes them want to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about the personality and the soul and the idea of, persona, meaning mask, and what we spend the first half of our lives building up. And sometimes, like you said, we'll spend up until our teenage years or whatever, when that call starts to come in and our soul starts to say, hey, what about me? I think one of the things to note is most, if not all, of what we build those, neuroses or personas or what self-constructs on is fear, survival energy. And we know we're more than that. We know that we are more than fear. trying to ameliorate itself, right? And so we have this soul energy kind of call us and wake us up. Well, that means that some of these constructs, if not all of them, that we built to make ourselves feel less afraid have to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's another part of why the anxiety gets so
worst.
intense during that time, is it's like, whoa, all of these things that I built to make myself feel safe and valuable have to go so that I can actually learn who I really am.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially because you're doing it to yourself, like there's an element of self-betrayal that you feel. And even though you're not, like, go to the, I mean, I'm sure you're going to love this, Steve, but go to Anatomy of Peace and the Arbinger Institute and all their stuff, right? And self-betrayal leads to turmoil. Sometimes honoring yourself feels like self-betrayal.
Yeah.
When I had to decide to change things about the personality that I had constructed over the years of being here and being a member and being all the things I was supposed to be, it felt like I was abandoning myself. It triggered my abandonment trauma. Like I was like, fuck, I'm not even, I didn't have myself anymore even. And so that self-betrayal often leads to even more heightened anxiety, which is why we then justify our new actions and try and fix things and freak out. And so even in honoring ourselves in that way, sometimes we do the opposite and get even more anxious.
It makes sense. And there's a threshold guardian. So what happens is, there's a call in the stories, and then there's there's some kind of guardian, and sometimes it's your mother, and she says, "Are you sure you can do that? I think you're full of shit," like that. Or your friends, or sometimes it's money or something, and it says, "Are you ready for this change?" Because if it's the soul calling, then there's a level of resistance you have to meet in any action, but in the soul's journey, you have a big personality reaction, like you said, that abandonment trauma in your case. And I love it. Like in every superhero show, eventually the superhero will meet the dark version of himself.
Yep.
And sometimes that's later on in the journey. We'll talk about that, but that's often this piece. You get to meet yourself in some way, and you're like, who am I really? And you have to check yourself on that threshold. And threshold's a really interesting spiritual technology. We get to thresholds of different kinds, and they demand something. And this is where we offer sacrifice in a ritual, and that sacrifice is usually something at the heart, or something that you have to give up that you thought your personality really loved, and you've got to fucking get rid of it, and it's just awful. A myth about yourself, in the bad way, or some misholding and misgiving served you.
Usually it's some kind of identity of like what kind of person you are, or what you're
label
good
you're
at.
clinging to, or like it's almost like a lifeboat. You're clinging a lifeboat. You're clinging to this like desire to be this thing.
Yeah.
And because this thing is known, and I know how to be this thing, I'm really good at it. I'm great in the classroom.
Yeah.
I have 2 classes right now, and one of them is Minecraft coding. It's ridiculous with freaking 6th graders. Kill me, right? But I'm great in the classroom. I've always been great in the classroom. I've known that about myself. Leaving the classroom right now has been terrifying and awful, but so necessary. And it's been really interesting because a year ago, I would never have been able to see the necessary while feeling the awful. I was not aware enough. I was not self-aware enough. But it's a big leap. But it's a thing of like, am I abandoning myself as the teacher? I'm like, no, I'm still a teacher. But it feels like that same kind of abandonment, like I'm abandoning who I am. Because, when you're a teacher, it's like all that you are. It becomes your entire identity. Now I'm teacher support. What does that even mean? I'm the teacher of teachers. I don't even know.
Yeah, and now you get to be a soul who happens to have a skill. Of managing a classroom well, which is different than being the guy who can manage any classroom.
Yeah, it's true.
There's a lot more spaciousness in, being the soul that's responding to every moment as a soul and not as an identity. The poem that I think is so great for this is and you guys will probably be able to know the title, but it's just the T.S. Eliot dark, dark, dark. They all go into the dark.
Yeah.
And the line that always catches me is asking not less than everything.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel when you say like this threshold. They're like, are you actually ready to give up what it's going to take?
That's actually the second threshold. So that's the deepening threshold. The first threshold is just, are you sure? Because you know you need to change. And it's like, are you sure you want to take this direction? Because you don't know yet that you're going to have to give everything up. You just know that something's wrong at this point. You know, you just know that something's off. You have the anxiety, you have something. And usually what happens is another person shows up who's been on a journey of their own, and they can see you, and they know what you're going through, and they say to you, I can see that you're having some hard times. And they're not going to tell you that you have to completely, fuck yourself up and give everything. Mm-hmm. But they're going to show you enough that you see it's true. And they're going to do a little magic, and they're going to predict your future a little bit, and they're going to see your soul enough that you see it too. And that's the mentor, right? This is the wizard. This is the thing. If Gandalf would have told Bilbo everything.
Right. Here's how to get past Smaug. Here's an invisibility cloak and a fucking spell. Yes. You'll be fine now. I'll come over and I'll just put him to sleep and he wakes up. It's all good.
Yeah. If Harry Potter had been told everything by Dumbledore right off.
Yeah, God, that kills me.
Right. He doesn't.
Like Dumbledore's kind of a dick. Like, do we know that? Like,
well, no.
But he has to be.
He has to be. And that's why the mentor goes away after the threshold. So in the hero's journey, the mentor gets you over the threshold. He lets you see yourself enough, but not too much, because if you see yourself too much, you get stuck in again. You get stuck in the process of process. And this is a spiritual cul-de-sac that people get in. And it's the process of processing. Mm-hmm. I have a friend or acquaintance that every time, I contact them or, have something to do with this, we're processing. We're really processing right now. We're just processing. I'm like, oh my God.
Stop processing.
Stop it. Like, get out the door, yo. Like, it's because you've seen a little too much and you're not really willing to let the old self go, but you think you can do it in your head. You cannot fix your head with your head. You cannot fix the ego with the ego. The ego sits down on the mat to give it to the ego. Who do you think wins? So this is the
two positives.
This is one of like on the journey. There's several places where you could hit and then have to go back. Where you not ready, going back to the threshold. I'm going to go back to my comfy life for a minute and just live my ego until my ego is a little bit more processed. Maybe I have some more resources and I can hit that threshold again. But you can get into this little spin right there at the threshold. Every threshold's like that. And you're like, okay, I'm ready. I'm doing it. I'm doing it, right? Look at me, Mom. I'm doing it. Yeah, right. I'm really doing it. You're just kind of like
Dad's still holding the bike, dude.
And talking about doing it and pretending to do it and playing to doing it without really getting it,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like when you're doing it, you can't say I'm doing it.
That's the funny part.
Like you're so in it and you're so freaked out. You're like, I don't know what the fuck's going on, but it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Like it's
I actually have this red flag that when my ego goes, I'm doing it. I'm like, oh no.
You're not doing it.
Oh no, I have to go back. It's like those board games where you have to go back to home.
You went down the ladder. But also I feel like there's the thing of like the mentor has to do that because the mentor is like the god of that situation. Mm-hmm. And so like, let's say Dumbledore, if he had told Harry everything, Harry would have believed him because of how much respect and power Dumbledore has. And then Harry would have just tried to be something he wasn't yet.
Yeah, he wasn't.
And wouldn't have been able to do it.
And there's a certain amount of immaturity in this process, and there has to be. It's built into humanity. A 12 to 14-year-old boy, for instance, has no idea of consequences. And that's because...
Preach.
That's because that's built into the system because they'll dare enough to put themselves out of themselves enough to grow and to mature. The testosterone needs to mature by being seen, met, and challenged and beaten. Actually, can't do it that way.
It's got to be a trial.
Yeah, and femininity has a different thing. It will expand and include everything in its process, and it has to be like, hey. No, you don't get to run the whole everything. Everything isn't we're not all in your emotions, So, there's all these different patterns, but we all have both of those and we all need to be met and hopefully we get friends along the way. That's one of the parts of the thing that will meet us and say, oh yeah, I see, I'm with you. And also I can see parts of you, and I am parts of you. These friends always represents parts of us. Like in dreams, if you're having a dream and you have a group of friends show up, it's your parts. These are the aspects of you, and they're playing roles, and you're getting to see yourself in this mirror in the dream state. Almost always the soul brings friends in, their acquaintances or old friends or new friends or whatever, as your parts of yourself who are mirroring you. And so we're in this mythic process, right? I can see this is going to be a 2-part thing. We're never gonna get through this in any.
I mean, we're at 30 minutes.
We're not even over.
We can do this.
We
got the call and the
we
threshold.
are a quarter through, and the juice is yet to happen.
What's next?
Okay. So we get over the threshold, and you get into the unknown world, and the reason why it's the unknown world is because you've done it. You've really, really left that part of your ego behind.
The reason it's the unknown world is because you've literally stepped over the threshold.
If you're still you in every sense, you're always you, but if you're still you in that personality sense and you haven't had to let some things go.
If some of you hasn't died, you haven't.
Some of you hasn't died. Or
crossing the threshold is always a sacrifice.
Always that, yes.
Think about like the thresholds into Hades and the sacrifice you have to do to move on to the underworld, and the sacrifice of going back out of the underworld. Like it's always threshold equals sacrifice.
Always.
Harry has to say goodbye to what he knows to join the wizarding world. Yeah. And it's not just his family that he hates. It's the clothes he's used to. Yes. It's the transportation he understands. He has to walk through a fucking wall in the middle of 2 stations.
Right.
He has to sacrifice.
That's such a great threshold.
Yeah.
You have to run at this wall.
Yeah, you don't even walk. Why the hell are we running?
It'll be okay.
It's bricks.
Yes.
It's equally as easy to walk up to it and put your hand through gently, but he runs.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's what they do. And the mentors are there saying, hey, this is a different world. It's
okay. You can run.
The rules are different than you thought they were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's hard for people. There's morality, there's pieces that we picked up around ourselves that were built for the safety of the ego and not built for the safety of us. Like one of the things they'll tell you in like financial seminars, the biggest risk is not taking a risk.
Yeah.
And it's true, but not the way they're saying. Like,
but it is. Sacrifice is essential to the threshold crossing.
Yes.
So if you think you've crossed the threshold and you cannot name your sacrifice, you haven't done it.
Yeah. And then the mentor has to leave you because you can't know what he knows or she knows or they know. You're not ready, right? And the mentor is usually meeting your journey on a place where they actually get called into their own journey. Gandalf gets called into his own journey and has to leave the hobbits, for instance. There's a thing that they're doing that's really important to them, and they meet you at that place, and they usually have to like either they're wise enough to stop talking to you. And you get the Ram Dass thing where it's like, go away. What's the thing that his
Maharaji?
Yeah, Maharaji. What's the things that Maharaji says after every time meeting with go? So he brings all these people, Ram Dass brings all these people to meet this guru, right? And all his friends get all this time with his guru, which he loves. He's basically in love with this guy. I mean, it's like he's devoted to this guru. And Ram Dass gets these tiny short little pieces. And his friends get lavished with all these teachings in his presence. And he's like, oh, you fucker.
Well, I mean...
that's it, man. He can't because he knows Ram Dass is there. He knows he's ready. He's right. And if he does any more for him, it's not honoring. And that's what the wizard knows.
That's the thing is it's not honoring, and it doesn't allow for the hero's journey to actually take place.
Yes.
There is no journey if someone takes you immediately to the destination. And like even Dumbledore, like Dumbledore is infuriatingly absent the whole time, but it's so necessary.
Because he knows, and he's on his own trip, right? He's got his own things to do. He's not just sitting back in his study going, no big deal. He's on his own journey, in his own way. Maybe a few times in. It's really important. We have gurus, we have spiritual teachers, and people think they're it. They want to find somebody who's going to do it for them, who's going to create the container or the process or the thing. And, if you just go study with, what's his name? The that I'm always harping on. He's great.
Joe Dispenza?
Joe Dispenza.
Okay.
If you're gonna go to Joe Dispenza and he's gonna give you the levels that you can follow, and if you just follow these levels, you'll get to something that's like special. And isn't that great? No, Joe Dispenza cannot fucking do this for you, and neither can any other guru or teacher, etc. And so, one of the things we get is like this over guru thing, and those wizards who aren't wise enough to step back and say, okay, what's your journey? Where is your place? So as soon as we get through all of that mess,
I want to share
Yes.
a thing from my life that's
Please,
coming
please.
up that I'm noticing is something that I've puzzled about in my tantra and sexual healing business is that it will go quiet for a while. And I won't do anything different for marketing, whatever. I'll just all of a sudden stop getting inquiries. And it's always when I go into, the next level of my own process. And somehow, like, it's communicated that I'm not available because I'm doing my own thing. So that was just an interesting little, like, personal reflection there.
Yeah, when you take on yourself as a coach too, sometimes you'll meet, I think, one of the problems with the modern spiritual life and modern spiritual path is that I might meet one or two people who I'm supposed to be the mentor for, who my medicine is just right, and it's going to change the world. My meeting with them is flash, and that is, I've lit something in a human. Teaching, I realize this, I'm not for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not for everybody. The people that I'm for, the people that I'm supposed to light up, are there, and we if we're going to make this into a business, we got to create this flow of people coming through, but I'm not the guy for each of those guys, and so having gone through this process and been in this process of mentor place, on this path, maybe I've been around a few times, I don't know, but that feels like a good place for me. And then, like, I don't want to be there. I want to be in my lot on the woods somewhere. You have to come find me. And man, you have to sacrifice a lot to come do that because you really want this knowledge. And, and a few find me. And I'm delighted when they do. And I say no. The mentor always says no, by the way. When the hero approaches the mentor, you knew something I need to know. And the mentor always goes, nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
The reluctant mentor.
I can't train you. You're too young. You're too old to start the training, rather. The mentor will always refuse you, and then you'll have to show that you actually are willing to show. And if that doesn't happen, have to happen in reality. But like, if you want to really get the sauce from somebody, if you really want to get the medicine that they have,
I mean, there's resistance.
it's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, there's either resistance in you or there's resistance in them. I mean, if you're trying to pull the value from someone, that's always a hard thing to share, even if that's your calling is to share that thing.
Yeah.
Whether there's like emotional blocks or physical blocks or just spiritual difficulties or whatever it is. Like when I talk on this very show, half the time I have to be like, okay. Share now. Like I have to make myself do it, right? And I've shared some pretty vulnerable things on this show already, and like that's not a thing that comes naturally. I think to most people, like you might be a natural sharer, but there's always resistance. There's always resistance when you're getting to the meat of something.
So we're in the unknown world.
Yeah, now we're in the unknown world, and the two energies. We could go through the formal Joseph Campbell stages, but that's too long. So the two energies that we're going to meet, and this is definitely we're not going to get this done in 5 minutes. And the two energies that we meet are the goddess and the father. Okay, so in a way, this is mother, father.
So why isn't it the goddess and the god?
Because father has an interesting direction for the hero particularly, right? Now, these are just archetypal patterns. Again, Michael Meade talks against the hero's journey a little bit. He says it's not for everybody. Everybody's not a hero. And Jung does too. Jung says everybody's out there trying to be a hero in this classic sense. But you got to fuzz the pattern a little bit. You know what I mean? Like step back from it. Don't get so serious about this being a hero. let's just talk about this being a human and somebody needing to find something, somebody needing to go through a process. And then it describes it really well. And it does describe the hero, the warrior who's out on a quest. It does describe that person. And it also describes somebody who's more feminine. There's a feminine hero's journey. The Disney movie Brave followed the feminine's journey deliberately to a T, and it works. It's genius. It's genius how they do it. And you think we don't all go through the masculine and the feminine journey and all these processes? We do. But two things are universal is that we will have to deal with the focus. We will have to deal with the presence of life. We'll have to meet life, presence for presence. And we'll deal with the feminine. And the feminine is never one thing. Feminine is always multiple. And the father is always the father. And it's an interesting pattern, right? So you meet these two archetypes. Do you guys think we should end that there and then start up on the next one, or should I just run that through fast and we'll get to the end? Because I've got probably 3 hours more material.
I think describe the father and the goddess and how they're different, and then that can be it for today.
Yeah.
1 second. It just lets me know I need to cut some stuff.
Okay, sorry about that.
You're good.
So the father, the goddess is the feminine, and the feminine always asks you a question beneath its multiple forms. It shows up as your mother, shows up as your sister, shows up as your lover.
Pallas Athena.
Yeah, it shows up as nature.
And I love the Athena. She's a goddess. And she disguises herself. We're talking about the Odyssey now, right?
Yeah.
And disguises herself as is it the uncle or the father? Something like that. It's a male familial relationship to Thrasymachus, and takes on the role of the father while asking questions and prompting. So they are the goddess and the father. And it's just so interesting.
So interesting, isn't it? And Harry Potter, Hermione shows up as this or that. Luke shows up as, Leia shows up as his lover, then his sister, And
Yikes.
And this is apropos for the journey's hero, because the feminine is all those things. It's a pure love of a sister, and it's the lusty love of a lover. And it asks you the same thing though, just in all the areas of life, and that is, what do you want? What do you really, really want? Galadriel at the well. This is challenging Frodo, and and this is that energy, all the time. And the feminine is everything. It's connected. It's the whole matrix. But it really wants to know, and it really asks you what you want, because you are everything.
As I say, it gets to the heart of things.
But you are also a very particular pattern, and that your soul, and that heart. What is it that you were built for? That's really, I guess, the question. What is it that you really inhabit that you could inhabit fully? It's interesting because the goddess calls us to presence. Isn't it interesting? That's the case in a way. We sit down in front of Kali, and if Kali says, "Hey, you get this wrong," your head is gonna be on my belt, and I'm gonna be standing on you with your blood in my dripping down my mouth.
This is everything. This is the heart and the meat of things.
You better take this seriously, boy.
So then, what about the father?
And then the father is always asked to say, it's always the same thing: is, can you do it? Do you have what it takes?
The action, the ability.
Do you really have what it takes to do what you need to do? Can you muster the courage?
Do you have the strength to resist the ring? Can you stand up to Voldemort again and again and again and again?
Are you going to stand, as yourself? Are you going to put up for yourself, right? Are you going to not get swayed by all the winds and the difficulties and the challenges that come through? And those two things are it, right? What do you want?
And can you do it?
Can you do it?
Yeah.
Are really the beefy, juicy things that we are working with, and that is you meet that in the underworld because you're not ready from a place of personality to really ask yourself that questions. You've got to show that on the threshold that you can leave, the
Not knowing those
part
answers.
of those things behind. Yeah, and you've got to be in curiosity. You've got to stop knowing. That's why it's the unknown world, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't know. You're in a land you don't know. Speak the language. You're in a land that's difficult. You don't know what's going to happen. Time stops meaning so much in the unknown world. You're in a liminal state of change and growth. There's not so much societal structure usually. Sometimes you're in the forest, etc. So you're off, and that's so Anyway, so we'll take we'll park our hero right in between the mother and the father.
Yeah,
and that's a good place to pick up.
Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to carry on with this conversation in our next episode, Hero's Journey Part 2. We hope that you enjoy our podcasts, and if so, please like, share, and subscribe, and check us out on soulandspiritwellness.com for more of our offerings.